Welcome r/EntitledParents. How I started a revolution in my entitled family. All I wanted was my sisters. I posted part of this in r/Amethyst hole as a recent conflict I will bring up later left me doubting myself, but due to so many people's interest I've decided to elaborate my family's boundless entitlement here. I'm currently in custody of my two little sisters, Amy who is 17 and Liza who is 8, not their real names for obvious reasons. I'm a 29 male, and we live in Australia. I'm Potato as that's what Liza calls me, and this is basically the story of how my family felt they were entitled to both of my sisters' bodies, and I wouldn't stand for that. I would like to warn anyone who has faced abuse in the past as parts of their story may trigger some people, and to anyone who has faced abuse in the past, I do feel deeply sorry for you. The main part of the story takes place about a year ago. I'd moved out 6 years ago at the time, and moved to another state for work and study. I was honestly really slack with keeping contact with my family, which is probably why this went on so long. When I do think back to the time before I moved out, I didn't treat Amy the best, and if I hadn't moved out and had so little contact with my family, I may have turned out just as entitled and as much of a horrible person. I came back to visit for a grandparent's birthday. After spending so long away, I spent the morning catching up with aunts, uncles, cousins, my parents of course, and Liza. Now this was actually the first time I'd really realized the oddities of my family. Perhaps it was the change in environment. A few of my roommates had little sisters and whatnot after all, but it was the first time I'd noticed how quiet the little girls of my family were. I guess I'd always just thought of Amy as shy and quiet, but my little cousins were so much the same. Polite, shy, quiet, and obedient. Though at the time I brushed this off. After a few hours, I realized that Amy was nowhere to be seen all day. The party was at my parents' house, so this confused me, and I slipped inside to see if she was cooped up in her room like a lot of 16-year-olds would be, talking to friends or doing assessments. What I found is a memory that will haunt me forever. My oldest uncle on my father's side, laying over my sister who was quite clearly in a lot of pain and struggling not to cry as he pinned her beneath him. I completely lost it as any brother would, shouting at him to get off her and out of her room. I scared the hell out of both of them, but in that moment, I was honestly ready to kill my uncle. Amy was pretty messed up in the head when I tried consoling her. She was covered in scars, had a rash that I later found out was an allergic reaction. She was allergic to strawberries. She didn't speak and looked at me as if she expected for me to hurt her too. Her room was dimly lit, the blinds taped closed to her wall. All the things she'd had when I left were gone, leaving her bedroom feeling cold and empty, and to add insult to injury, she was a month pregnant. When I demanded an explanation from my parents, they, paraphrasing, said that it was my uncle's right, and my father simply pointed out one of my 11-year-old cousins sitting quietly with her parents and told me to have fun. I stormed off back to Amy's room, quietly packed her a bag of necessities, and managed to sneak her out of the house and into my car before doing the same with Liza. Part of my wanted to get all my cousins out too, but my main focus was of Amy right now, who sat trembling in the back of my car. I drove them both to the closest police station to report what was happening. I'll skip most the details of the legal battle that ensued, but my family did not take kindly to being outed for what they were doing. It was a tradition that spanned generations, and there shouldn't be anything wrong with tradition. Amy and Liza were put into temporary foster care. Amy was wreck. To her, everyone could and would hurt her, and I got reports every few hours that she was having a panic attack. 3 of my uncles went to jail for a very long time. I got a fair bit of money out of a range of family members, full custody of both Amy and Liza, no enforced visitation to their parents. My parents had to pay for any therapy costs, medication and medical needs for both of them. My family was torn in two by this, many of my aunts leaving their husbands with their children after finally having the courage to follow me. Uncles who had married into the family took their wives, who had also been abused, and cut off ties. I still keep in contact with these members of my family, and I'm grateful for their support and glad that my cousins are safer now. Even some of the older guys who had been brought up thinking it was okay to treat women that way took themselves into counseling once they realized just how messed up it was, and I've had more than one instance where they admitted to hurting Amy and apologized, which I've accepted as these cousins did their best to take their siblings or other cousins out of harmful environments. Now I do believe some part of the ruling protected the younger men of the family, provided they see some form of mental health professional, as they grew up thinking that this was all normal, so they didn't end up in jail, but did end up on some list of possible sex offenders. Not entirely sure there. No one is sure who fathered Amy's child, but she had her pregnancy terminated as we were told her physical and mental health would not cope with carrying a baby she ultimately would unlikely care for. She did consent at the time, and it was brought up by her psychologist once she was doing better, and she confirmed that she would have no love for the baby due to the circumstances which she fell pregnant. For 6 years, Amy had been physically, sexually, mentally, and emotionally abused in every way conceivable. This mostly came from my father's 4 brothers and brother-in-law who married into the family. My parents both stood by and let this happen, offering no support for Amy. During the case, my uncles argued it was their birthright being born into their family, and it was simply Amy's rite of passage before she was married off to one of my uncle's mates at 18. They used her allergy as a form of torture and manipulation. Wanting her to be silent and obedient, they would press strawberries against her skin anytime she said a word and force her to eat them when she stepped too far out of line. A lot of my aunts from my father's side admitted to enduring this treatment too, although most of them were lucky and didn't have allergies to exploit. I honestly can't even begin to explain everything that was wrong with Amy because of their behavior. Liza, for the most part, was okay. She needed a little therapy as she was being groomed into compliance and taught that what she would experience was normal, but Amy had completely shut down. It took 2 months before I could even get her speaking. She trusts me now, and we often sit down, and I'll let her talk and open up about whatever she feels comfortable to. Her stories often have me struggling to hold back tears while I comfort her. I did get Amy a service dog a few months ago, tailored towards the emotional support she needs on a regular basis. Lickety Split honestly is the goodest of good doggos. She knows exactly when she's needed and is a massive help when it comes to calming Amy's anxiety, especially in public. We've had more than one encounter with unrelated entitled parents thinking they or their kid deserves her dog more than her. Let me know if you want these stories published too, because I've seen people like to read about service dog related incidents, but anyone who does think that can honestly fight me. No one deserves her dog more than her. On one occasion, one of my aunts, her husband went to jail, tried taking Lickety Split because their money paid for her. I told her if she ever comes near my property again, I would call the police, as there was a restraining order against her towards both my sisters. Later she came back and tried to poison Lickety Split with tainted meat, but one of my lovely neighbors caught her and chased her off. Police were called. She is now in jail too after having to pay a fine and some money to me, because at this point, I'm pretty well acquainted in the legal system and sued her. My family still tried to get my sisters out of my care, reporting me for everything from animal abuse to drug trafficking. They planted drugs in an identical stuffed toy to Amy's comfort toy, left it in the yard, but Amy would never do that, so I knew something was up immediately. Home security systems work wonders. I've actually become pretty chummy with the local police officers who have to inspect their claims, but they know I'd never do anything to endanger my custody over the girls. They mean the world to me. I will admit though, I have done things to hurt me bond with them, yelling when stressed, and throwing things from time to time, but I'm not perfect, and Amy has told me that, although these moments do scare her, she doesn't feel endangered being near me when they happen. I also spoil them a little when they do happen. Now the reason this ended on Twitter is because a few weeks ago my mother contacted me saying she wanted to talk. I was hesitant, but agreed, and we met up in the next town over. No way I could be followed home. My mother explained how she was in the process of divorcing my father and she wanted to have a relationship with me and my sisters, with emphasis on mending her bond with Amy, who had not called her mum in years. She explained how she was pressured into the marriage after she gotten pregnant with me and never wanted that life for her daughters. I flat out told her no, something several members of my family disagreed with, as she could have done literally anything to support Amy emotionally with what was happening, done anything to make her feel better or more secure with what was happening to her, but instead she was shunned and isolated except for when she was needed to cook, clean or provide some sort of service to the family, even going as far as to berate her whenever she did try to confide in my mum that she was in pain or scared. Amy was well past her breaking point when I took her and had even planned on killing herself less than a week after my visit. My mother argued that she had the same right as the other members of my family who had left and had contact with my sisters, but I told her it was because they were doing it to protect their children and themselves. They didn't wait a year after losing custody to try and fight for them, and I really don't even need to give a reason. I have custody and she does not. Members of ETA convince me that when Amy is in a better place mentally and Liza is older, I bring it up with them, leave the decision in their hands. I've been told Amy will be a dependent well after she turns 18. Her mind just doesn't function properly, so there is no risk of her mother getting into contact behind my back, even when she's an adult. And while Amy does have a phone and a computer, she doesn't have any social media as she doesn't want any chance of her family trying to contact her, as they've threatened her with many forms of torture in the past. This story doesn't have a slam dunk ending. I have my sisters and they're in a safe environment where they'll get to grow up as kids. Amy is getting the help she needs and is slowly making her way out of tower she built to protect herself in the only way she could, but she knows there isn't a rush to come out. I'll work with her at the pace she sets. She's still discovering her own interests, but quite like just reading a book with a form of fruity tea. She also has a small collection of stuffed animals, mostly Build-A-Bear, that she adores and takes one with her everywhere. She's sensitive to texture, so the feeling is a comfort for her, and once a week we sit down to try to find Build-A-Bears she likes. We only have 3 Build-A-Bears on her wish list, and honestly, I've loved helping Amy discover herself. She lost a lot of her ability to think and feel for herself during this time, and watching her find her favorite book genre or her favorite types of music is a great feeling, knowing how far she's come, and I live for the days she actually manages a smile. I'd be willing to answer most questions, so if you want to know anything, just ask, as I want to bring awareness that these things are still happening to other kids, but obviously some things I'd rather keep to myself for the girls' sake. TL. Doctor. Entitled family feel they have a right to do what they want with my little sister bodies. After I get custody, mother believes she still has a right to see them. Edit. First off, thanks for the awards. It means a lot. And thank you for everyone offering your kind words and support. It's honestly really difficult this past year, and at times I really do struggle, but have to stay strong having my 2 little girls depend on me so much, and the support Every has shown is truly the best. Some extra notes. Amy was pulled out of school at 10, a few months after I left home. She was kept isolated in her room and had very little meaningful contact. Also, I'm not going to share a photo of Lickety Split, as she is a very recognizable dog, and not everyone who has contact with Amy and her dog know the full story, so I'd rather not draw and links between this story and her real day-to-day life, as she struggles with it enough. Edit 2. Wow, this blew up overnight. Thank you for all the awards, and sorry if I don't get back to some people. Also, I'm meeting back up with my mother later today to talk to her about the possibility of seeing the girls in the future once Amy is a lot more stable and Liza is old enough to understand what I saved her from, and the decision will be entirely theirs. Edit 3. Answering the commonly asked questions to save myself repeating. Yes, I was groomed to, but much differently. I was taught I could treat the woman in my family how I wanted, but I was never really a violent person and sexually driven. I was a jerk, and although I have anger issues at times, taking it out on other people is not something I ever saw effective. My focuses were more on my studying. Some of the other men in my family were the same, and were never really abusive. Unfortunately, it never really clicked in my head that, if I was being taught that, what were they teaching my sisters behind my back? I blame myself fully because of how long Amy suffered, and do my best to make amends for it by showing her love no one else cared to do. I'm in therapy too. I work closely with my AIMS therapist too, so don't worry about my mental well-being. I'm looking after me too. And for those mentioning BS, because I didn't go into detail about all the legal detail, I would go days on just a few hours of sleep during the whole legal battle, because I would be looking into every detail I could to know how to help my sisters. Most of it is a messy blur. I also didn't feel many people would care to listen, and I had to chop loads out of my story and still had people saying it was too long. The story is unbelievable, I get that. I wouldn't want to believe it either. You don't need to say it though, just downvote and move along. I don't care what you choose to believe. Amy was pulled out under the premise that she was being homeschooled. I'm not sure how it worked from there. I was never homeschooled, and I didn't homeschool the girls. I'm not sure how my family got around docs or anything like that. I just know it worked for 6 years. Update: I've just posted my first Doggo stories for those who were interested. Update 2: posted the second Doggo story.